So Gabe asked me to speak, and I didn't really know what to speak about, which I always have a problem with. So I said, let me let you choose what to speak about. So I had a forum, and people submitted questions, things that they've been wondering about WordPress. And so we're going to play a little roulette. We'll spin the wheel, and we'll answer some questions. So if you see your question and you'd like to, feel free to raise your hand just so I know who asked it. And after we go through each question, we'll have a little discussion, and you can ask additional questions and follow-up questions. So someone asked, on some sites, editing the CSS in the theme editor doesn't work unless I go to appearances/custom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the different ways you can change CSS on your site. So the first way is if you go into the theme editor. So this may not be available to you. It depends if it's enabled on your site or not. But basically you come to appearance, and I also wasn't sure which view the person was speaking about. So I'm going to go through all of them, and we're going to talk about what are the best ways to accomplish this. So the first way you can do it is go to Appearance and Theme Editor, and it will pull up your theme. You can also change on your right there. You can change to a different theme that's not active, but it will choose your default one by.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What version of WordPress is it?
So I'm using Trunk, which is like the latest and greatest. So there might be some things that haven't been released publicly yet, but for the most part, this will be the latest version of WordPress. Yep, that's in there. But sometimes hosts or certain capabilities will prevent you from seeing that. Okay, no problem. And the reason is that you're editing your files directly. So sometimes they, if your site manager doesn't want your customers to do that, they might disable this. So this is great because you can edit any file on your theme, but there's a problem with this. If you edit any of these and then there's an update to that theme that you've just edited, and you update, basically what happens is the new version of the theme gets downloaded, the old one gets deleted and then replaced. So you could come in here and spend a couple hours changing your CSS, and then version 1.8 or whatever as the next version comes out, and you lose all that work if you didn't download it and save it somewhere or have a backup. So this is a pretty dangerous way to do things. It gets the job done. The other way that's a little bit better is, say you're using, I'm using 2019 in my examples. You could create a child theme. So a child theme, you would basically create a folder, you would name it. I used a plugin. I'm not sure what plugin. It's I think it was Child Theme Creator, and it allowed me to just, with a click of a button, create a child theme. But all you need for a child theme is a style.css file and a functions.php file. And then in your child theme CSS file, you would just say the template is whatever the parent theme should be. So in this case, my child theme uses 2019, which is one of the default WordPress themes. And so the reason why you only need a couple of files here is because if the files don't exist in the child theme, it's going to use the parent theme or the template themes version of that file instead. So this is advantageous because now we can change any file we want, and if the parent theme gets updated, this is not going to get erased because this is our own theme that isn't connected to any publicly released theme. So in the previous example where we come in here and we spend a couple hours changing our CSS, this is the way to do it. This is a better way to do that. The third way to do it is to use the customizer. So in this example, there's a little notice. This is, did you know? There's no need to change your CSS here. This is a child theme, so it's okay if we do it that way. But say we were here, we would want to use the built-in CSS editor. And so if I click that, it's going to take me into this view, which is called the customizer. And the customizer is a way to edit your site without users seeing the changes. And you'll see a live preview of the changes. But in this view, there's the additional CSS section where you can add whatever CSS you want. But the great part is it'll also validate your CSS. So in this example, I'm missing my R from my background color. but it gives me, it highlights it and it gives me a warning here. And if you miss parentheses or closing braces, it'll tell you that too. And like I said, it will live preview it for you. So here, don't do this. This isn't good for accessibility or your eyes, but just wanted to make an example. Background color red, color white. The other cool thing with the customizer is you can schedule things. So if you click on the gear right up here, you can say whether to save it as a draft, schedule it, or publish it immediately. And you get a preview link that you can actually send to a customer or somebody that you're working on the site with. So you can come in and make your site red and say, hey, this is what I want to do. Here's a preview link. They can look at it and see what it looks like. They can approve it if they want. And then you can also, so say on Halloween you want it to be black with orange and all this stuff, you can schedule it to go live at a certain date and time. So this is a great way to, you can use this for you know, like putting marketing live. If you have a banner widget or something like that, you can edit all your widgets from here, and you could schedule them to go live and show the sale at midnight or something like that. Yeah?
That's actually pretty cool. I've never actually used that. I've seen it, but I haven't found a use case to use it. Do you know what happens if I go and schedule changes to take in like tomorrow?
Yep.
Or next week, but then tomorrow you want to make other different CSS changes. You know, is it version controlled, or how is it?
So basically what happens is this is just a post type, and so these are called change sets, and the change sets are just posts, and that's how we can use the scheduled dates and all that. I don't know if you schedule them for further dates. I think they would just replace them each other.
Okay.
So there would be one most recent, but I haven't tested that. That's also great because there's also revisions. So if you come in and you make changes here, there's no official way to view them, but if you wanted to go into the admin and somehow enable it so that you could see the change set posts in the admin, you could go back to, oh, what did I have last year on St. Patrick's Day? Let me go back to that, and you can go back and find the one that went live on that date. And yeah. So yeah, so that's a really cool aspect of the customizer. This is something that I feel like it never really got the love it deserved, and people really started to use it, and then kind of Gutenberg came in and people started to change their focus there. But there's a lot of cool things in the customizer. And there's also pens. So whenever you see the pen or the pencil, you can click that and it will take you in the section in the customizer where you can actually edit that stuff. So if I enter CSS here, what actually happens? As I mentioned, it gets saved as a post, which is, you don't really need to know that, but when you view the page, there will be a style tag with that custom CSS in it right before the closing head tag. So this is great because anything you put in there will be put on the page after all the CSS style sheets are loaded. So you have some pesky style sheets that are doing things, loading order is important. So it always makes sure that it's the last CSS stuff loaded in the head. The other cool thing about this is at the bottom here, there are different screen orientations. So you could come in here and work on your tablet in your mobile site as well. So I'm doing a media query for screens that are a max width of 768 pixels, and for those screens I say make it white with black text, and so here we can test that. And again, all this stuff happens without any users seeing this. This is only within that change set that you only have access to see. So some cool things that you can do with that. But what happens when you have caching? So we've all heard clear your browser cache, right? And this is because when your browser downloads something like an image or a style sheet or a JavaScript file, it tries to be smart about it. So these things don't change very often. Most of the time they stay the same for a while. So what it does is it tries to hold a copy of that on the person's computer after the first time they go to it. So that does a few things. The site loads faster on successive loads. It's less computing power, less bandwidth going back and forth, less connections. And so if the URL is exactly the same, it's going to consider it as the same thing. And so CDNs, like I use Cloudflare for a lot of my sites. You can configure that. I usually do like 1 or 2 years on my CSS and JavaScript files and images because they don't change. And so basically, this is how a theme, there's ways around that. And so this is how a theme would register a script. So I'm saying, you don't have to understand what's happening here, but basically what I'm saying is enqueue my script called my theme. It's located here. And the version is 1.1. So that's important because when you do this, WordPress will add that to the end. So have you ever seen there's a question mark, v equals 1 or 2, whatever it is? That basically translates to what was entered here. So when a new version of WordPress comes out, the version is changed. And so the version at the end changes. So I took this when I was using the release candidate for 5.2, and that's what the version was on all WordPress core scripts and styles. As soon as you update to the next version, this changes. So that ensures that it's called cache busting. So the next time that a user goes to your website, their browser is going to view those links as completely different, and it's going to go get fresh versions of those styles. So it could be that the theme that you were using, whoever, did the person that asked this question, are they here? Okay, yeah. So it could be that the version of the theme you were using did not define a version on their style sheet. And so if you went in and edited the style sheet the first way, the browsers wouldn't know that it was different because there was no cache busting. And likewise, even if you did edit the file, the version didn't change, so the URL wasn't going to change either. There's also page caching. So page caching would be a problem because if this is output in the page, and then page caching is persistent. So if I go to the page, the server is going to render the page. It's going to take the result of what happens, and it's going to cache it into usually a like an HTML file or something like that. And then the next person that comes is going to get that already rendered version of that file. So if I go to it and the background is red and the color is white, and then the cache says, okay, we're going to save it for 1 hour. Whatever gets cached, wait for an hour before regenerating the page. And then Shane goes in and he makes a change, changes it back to white and blue text or whatever he wants to mess with now. Because that entire page is cached, unless he clears that page cache on the server, the next people are going to continue to see that until the cache invalidates. So that's another potential issue. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions on any of that? Does that make sense? Is anybody confused about any parts of that?
It makes sense, but how does it fix it?
So ways you can fix it is if you're using the customizer, you just make sure you clear your page cache. So most of the time people use a plugin like W3 Total Cache or something like that. There's usually just an option to just clear your page cache. And that's a good way. When I'm done working, I usually always do that just to make sure that it's fresh.
How would you get to add a version number?
Oh, okay, yep. So the question is how, for the video, how would you get it to add a version number? So one way to do it would be in your theme. You have a different version number here, right? So what I usually do is I have either a constant in PHP, that's the version number, and then I use that constant when I register my style sheets. Here. So instead of hard coding it, it would just be a variable, and then I change that variable in one place, and then all my things change automatically. Sometimes people will do it based on the time that the file was last modified. So there's ways to say, okay, in PHP, say when was the style sheet actually last updated, and it would actually use that like timestamp. But that's instead of having like a hard-coded value that it will use in a variable, that you have to actually do that. There's computing associated with that. So I usually just do like a variable or a constant for that. So if you're a theme author, or you're even plugins have to do the same thing. They register their scripts. They should have a version that gets changed every time that a new version goes out, and it just ensures that everybody gets that fresh version of those files.
clients that go in and
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend they use the customizer. Use that feature. That's probably the best way. Or they could use. They could use the. You could probably build something. So I guess in that instance, using the modified date of the file would probably be best for that, because every time they save an updated version, it would change the timestamp, and then it would know. But that's going to result in more more cache flushes and more cache busting. So 1,000 people go to your site every month and they update it, twice a month. They're not going to get any benefit of browser caching on that instance, because they're going to have to get a fresh one every time. So, anybody else? Did I answer?
Yes, I had run into that a couple times actually. Somebody inherited from an old developer, and I was trying to update the child theme, the CSS in the editor, and nothing. And I go up and I mess with the code, or I feel a semicolon or something stupid, so copy the CSS into the appearances. CSS can work fine right away. So it must have been a version thing, I think.
Yep, there's probably a browser. A good way to test that too is if you open the inspector in Chrome or Firefox or whatever you're using. If you go to the network tab, there's a checkbox that says disable caches. So usually when I'm developing, I'll open that up, and then I know that everything's going to get fetched every page load. And it's a good way to, let me see if I can show you here. Yeah, so if you go to the network tab, it's right here, disable cache. And then when you refresh, you'll see, you'll actually see that, you won't be able to tell here, but over here you'll see it'll actually say cached, and it will show that it did not go and get the resource again. Let's see here. Yep, so you can see all of these are cached. So these assets were not grabbed on this page load. But if I were to disable this, then they're going to actually get fresh. They're going to be grabbed fresh. Yeah, and there's very easy ways to configure this. There's headers that get sent with different content types. So in your htaccess file or your nginx file, you can actually write a rule that any file of a certain type served from the server will be accompanied with this expiration header, and you can say however long you want. The way I mentioned that I use Cloudflare. Basically what I do is, try to find my speaker notes here, but basically what I do is if the server hasn't specified its own expiration, then Cloudflare will add one in by default. So that way I know that every asset that I have, every asset that my server is serving up, I know that it's going to be accompanied by an expiration header. Another way to identify this is if you go to the Google PageSpeed tool. It will tell you if you're not specifying that, and it will say, hey, cache your static assets, use browser caching. And they'll have some tips there that you can use to help you with that. Okay. All right, let's roll the wheel again. Round and round it goes. Nobody likes 00, right? 0. So, I'm having an issue with some widgets. I populate a secondary widget area with a few common items like a donate button and follow us. It shows up on all the pages except for my home page. All right. I like it. The people that didn't show up are not the people that asked the questions. That's perfect. I like it. So this could be a bunch of things. The first one is that it could be theme specific. So just because there are widget areas doesn't mean that they're used everywhere. So sometimes that's confusing. Okay, so it varies. So it varies theme to theme. So for example, this is the 2017 theme, which was the second most recent default theme in WordPress. And so by default, just trying to get rid of it. There you go. By default, it's going to show all of your posts on your home page. So the post pages actually show the sidebar. This theme only has one sidebar. But if I was to change The home page to show a page, a specific page, they're not there anymore. And so that's because these are all the different template files that you could possibly have in a WordPress theme. So if we follow this here, so we're on the site front page. We can use frontpage.php if it exists. If not, it's going to go to, okay, are there pages or are there posts? If there's posts, it's going to go to home.php. And if that's not there, it'll go to index.php. But if there's pages shown on the front, it's going to look for a page template. If there's a template, it will use that. Otherwise, is it a default template or a custom one? And so all these different paths are possible. If it's a date archive or a category archive, those could have widget areas that are specific only to that specific section of the site. So it's possible that the theme doesn't have it there. Does that make sense?
This is a static home page, which I believe is handled somewhat differently. When I go into I'm customizing my theme on my website, right? If I go to widgets, it brings up my website, and I can navigate to all the pages.
Yep.
And it says on every page, your theme has 6 widget areas, but this page doesn't display any of them. But yet everything but the home page, that one widget that I populated does. Right.
Yeah, I think that homepage template that's being used is just not displaying the widgets, and that could be.
Old one.
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
It could be for a bunch of reasons. It could be just that the homepage is very much visual, and they just didn't. The design that's in that theme just doesn't have room for this. And sometimes it just doesn't add value to the home page itself. Like if you have a home page, usually you're trying to funnel your users into specific areas.
Yeah.
So like a list of category links might not work well there. But some themes will do that in a way, they'll handle that in a way where they have a blog sidebar and then they have a page sidebar or something like that. So one way that you, besides editing your theme files that you can get around that, is the new block editor. So who's used the new editor? Who's not sure if they've used the new editor? Okay, so the new editor looks something like this. It's supposed to play right away. Let's see. It's loading. There we go. So the new editor is, it's meant to be more of a visual representation of what you're seeing. So as you're editing in the admin area, you're going to see a more accurate picture of what you're actually building. And so this, I'm making a gallery here. I'm moving things around. And if you know the old editor, you're going to see like how much different this is. And I say, oh, I want it to be like that. I want it to be, 4 or 5 columns instead. And then at the bottom, so the examples talked about a donate button. So there's a button block. So each of these things are blocks and they're individual components. So I decided, okay, instead of using the widgets, I'm just going to put it into my page, however I want. And you can align it, you can move it wherever you'd like. And then maybe I want to put like a quote or a testimonial underneath that to show, that you should donate to me. These people recommend me. And so this is, I show this because this is kind of where things are progressing. Things are going to be less and less theme-based, and the designs are going to be more structured sets of blocks that you can use that have styles. So this right here, I've highlighted these 2 things, and I made it into a shared block. So what this is going to do is it's going to take this chunk of 2 blocks, it's going to save it into the database so I can reuse it on any page I want. So it's kind of like widget, where you're making that widget and it gets reused everywhere. It's just as a block. So now if I want to create a new page, it was a little slow when I made this video. I can come in and I can insert that block by name, whatever I named it, and it will put the same block into that page. So the widgets are kind of like this. They're those structured elements where you have like a title and how many posts you want to show and that type of thing. And the blocks, the widget page is actually just going to get replaced with the blocks editor. So you'll be able to have sections of blocks on the page, but you'll be putting blocks into that instead of widgets. Another great example of this is if you, come on. Here we go. So another thing that you can do with this is you can have dynamic blocks. So in this example, I have a testimonial block from a plugin that I found, and I have different testimonials, and I can have different columns and stuff like that, different image orientations, and I can update these testimonials on any page that has this block, and it will update everywhere. So it makes managing that really easy. I don't have to have a custom post type to enter testimonials anymore. I can just use this. I change my donation link. I have a new provider for processing my donations. And then if I go back to my other page, I can remove the old block that I was using, and I can put that new one in. So yeah, ta-da.
Remember which testimonial plugin you used?
I can tell you. At the end, I'll tell you which one. I'll fire it up. So yeah, so themes are really going to become these sets of styles. They're going to become, you know, maybe you can't use this carousel block, and images, we have these different sizes, and we want you to, we add this orientation into a certain block. They're just going to become packaged sets of blocks, I think. And the reason is that you can do everything you would do with different page templates right in the editor. So as long as you control like what the grids are and what the columns are and the spatial elements of like padding and all that stuff throughout the theme, you really don't need page templates anymore. It'll just render in the block editor. And eventually this will become probably a replacement for the customizer, where you could do this while you're on the front end and you could see it contextually within the high level page structures. Did that help you?
Yeah, it gave me some things to think about.
Okay. There's if you go to the WordPress.org repository for the themes, they believe they have a tag that's for block editor compatible. So you can click it and you can see all the themes that say that they're compatible with Gutenberg, with the block editor, and you can test them. And
yeah, I inherited this website that is a child theme with very old themes.
Mm-hmm. I'm just starting up my local machine. I'm going to actually show. I thought of something that would be good to show. The customizer allows you to actually test themes out without activating them. So, anybody have any questions on that? Any thoughts or anything? Doesn't have to be directly widget related. It can be.
If anybody hasn't used it, the reusable blocks are really handy.
Was that for anybody? Was that the only editor that they've ever used in WordPress? We've all used the classic editor. We're all familiar with that. Okay. I always wonder, like, when the people are going to start to come in, the people that don't have any idea what the old editor is soon. We'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch the transition process. It's going pretty fast.
Okay. So if I come into the customizer, which you can always get to on the front end here, you can actually test. So these are the themes I have on my site right now. Or you can go out and look for a new theme. So say I wanted to install and preview. I can mess with different colors. And again, this is all happening without the user knowing about it. So, you can come in here and break whatever you want and try out whatever you want. And it's going to refresh, and you can try it out, find what you like, get rid of that. This is interactive. I can actually navigate to different pages as well. But you can do that all within the customizer. And if you don't want to save it, you can just go away. Or if you're not sure, I think you have to, with themes, you have to activate it. But with everything else, once the theme is active, you could save it as a draft, and you could always return to it later. So if I want to activate, yeah.
I mean, I don't want the customizer. I like the customizer. I don't want it to go with that. You know what I mean?
It probably will stick around, but depending on how, like the implementation details of how the block editor gets put onto the front end eventually, which is probably still a couple years out until it would probably be best to get it right in the admin first, and then allow it to go onto the front ends of WordPress sites. But like Drupal uses the block editor. They actually have a module that you can activate to use Gutenberg. There's some sites that they use it in specific contexts that aren't the WordPress admin area. So it's definitely portable. It's just a matter of hooking it up to save the data, persistency to it. Yes?
How are you from being able to use it for theirs and things?
Yeah, so good question. So it all depends. You could have you could set up your theme to have a header type, like a post type or something, and you could use the block editor for that, and then just pull in the post that you select from a drop down as a header. You could probably do it now. It would probably end up being where a header could just be a group of repeatable blocks. You can have block templates, so when you create a new post, you can set up what blocks show up on the page. So you could set a book, say you have a book post type. You could set it up where there's an image, and then there's an author, a publisher, and then a description field, and you could set it up how you want it designed. And that way, when the customer opens up a new book, they put it in the way you want. That's something that people always struggle with in the old editor is, well, you have to make sure you right align it or else it won't show up correctly and things like that. But with blocks, you can set the properties on each block and have that show up as a template with placeholders so that they can just have to drop in their information there. So for the header, it would be, maybe the theme just has a specific image, banner image, and all these other different things that yeah, you would need the navigation block, which is phase 2, is being worked on right now.
That's what I did. I was like, how far
Yeah,
are we from there?
that should be out by the end of the year. But yeah, as far as being like a holistic replacement of that, it really depends on the next step for themes, and what the old PHP files that we know right now are always going to probably be around. They'll never be able to just fully go away, but you will start to see some themes that are less and less PHP template files because they're just basically a style guide, for your site instead of, which kind of is what a theme really is. A theme really is just a style or a design for your site, not so much.
WordPress has it within their theme, which is pretty useful.
Are you trying to sell me to drop Genesis?
I'm still using Genesis. I like to experiment, this is what helps deploy sites faster.
I'm just trying to get my presenter view back here.
Clean code.
Ah, oh, no! having trouble with my double screen here today. Let's see. Promise. All right, there we go. All right, so we're gonna roll the wheel again. Anybody have anything else on that? Gonna move on to the next one. All right, let's roll the wheel again. Is it okay to use the same word in various keywords if it's part of like a phrase? So let's say I'm selling hats, and one product page, the keyword might be blue Seahawks hat, and the other one might be green Seahawks hat. Will they compete with each other too much? So an SEO question. Does anybody ask that here? Okay. So for that, I took out my magic ball. And I'm going to preface this with I'm not an SEO expert, but I asked a friend, that is, and so his recommendation was to consolidate. He said that you never want to have similar pages competing against each other because there will be some level of competition for those two pages. And it will basically spread out the authority on your site for that words. So he said it's better to have Seahawks hat be the keyword and avoid any descriptors for something. So a good example would be to consolidate it into one page, one product page, and you just have like a variation for color. Things like that. But that helps because now you're ranking for Seahawks hat, which is probably more likely that someone looks for that than a specific color. Yeah. So you might want to get licensing before you sell the Seahawks hat, though. Yeah, I won't tell anyone.
I've been thinking about that. Everything I read says that. It says don't compete with your other pages, whatever. That's actually what I mentioned when I did my Yoast tutorial before. But I've been doing a couple of retail sites lately, and it's just selling a whole bunch of shirts and a whole bunch of when I was a jewelry store. So I don't want to put the word necklace in 1,800 different SKUs she has.
Yep, and if you absolutely have to have different products for each one, you don't want to have variable products. It's too difficult for your inventory or whatever it is. I would recommend having a landing page for Seahawks hats, and each product, each individual page under that would just have to have a canonical to that master page there. Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else? Any other SEO questions so you can look into my magic ball? All right. We'll roll the wheel again. We got 24. Anybody's lucky number? I think I'm going to go play all those numbers that in the pictures. So what is a hook and when should that be used? Who had that question? Anybody? We get the first one and someone is not here.
No, that was me. I'm trying to keep you busy because I kept getting ideas. So I'm like, all right, I'll send it over.
They all came in late, and I know why. He was procrastinating at work today. So if we look up the definition of hooks in the WordPress documentation, hooks are a way for one piece of code to interact or modify another piece of code. So you could think of it as like a product comes off there's two types. There's an action and a filter. So a filter allows you to change things, and an action allows you to do things. So the action would be like, hey, we manufactured all these cups, and they're all set. And this is a list of the cups. And a filter would be, hey, we're done manufacturing these cups. Do we have to print anything on them? Like here they are, you could do what you want with them, right? So that might be, oh, well, let's add a logo to them, or let's wrap them in a special bag or something like that. So these are found all throughout WordPress, and these are great because you don't have to go into WordPress and change WordPress's code. And this is important for the same reason that we talked about with the themes, because when a new version of WordPress comes out, you're going to lose all your changes, right? But also, you could introduce some insecure code into WordPress, and your site could get hacked. You never know what changing the core code base will happen. Will make happen, but you always want to avoid doing that. And so this is basically a way to not have to do that. WordPress has all kinds of these built in. This is what they'll look like. It'll say, have some code that does something, and it'll say do action, action name, and then it will pass. Actions don't have to pass anything, but they can. And they could pass as many variables as they want, and that could be something like the template file name that was loaded, or the time, or all different things, whatever is important in the context of the action. And then a filter. You'll always have apply filters and the name of the filter. A filter always has to pass at least one thing. So it could be false, it could be an empty variable, but it has to pass something. And then like the actions, it can have additional variables. And filters always return something. And that's like that example at the end where we're giving you, hey, here's all these cups. Do whatever you have to do with them and then give them back to us. So it would always be, cups equals apply filters, change cups, here's the cups, and so on. Some examples in WordPress. This is one that changes the post thumbnail size. So before it loads the image for the post thumbnail on a blog post, it will basically run through this. It will say, do the post thumbnail size. Here's the size, and this is the post that we're trying to get the size for. And then it will get it here, and then it would generate the image for the theme. And then this is probably an action you've all seen if you've ever dove into the code. Do action init. And this basically runs once WordPress is fully initialized and is ready. All the APIs are available, and you can do what you need to with it. So why would you use these, and why are they good? So for a theme, I know we have a couple Genesis users here, but basically in Genesis they're really good about including actions in their theme. And that's great because you can hook onto the actions and run functions. So they might have an action after header, after footer, before footer, and you can use those to add a function to execute at that point and add a banner or a sales banner or a link to a donation button on every page, something like that. And a filter could be used to, maybe it says use post thumbnails and it's true, but you want to turn that off. So you would filter that and say false, and then it would turn off the post thumbnails in the theme. But as a theme developer or a plugin developer, it gives people, it's flexibility. So it's basically like all the options we saw in the customizer, it would be like giving them ways to interact with it. That's a user interface, and this is basically the code way for people to interact with WordPress and change things. You can never have too many actions. If you're building a plugin, you never know how someone's going to use something. So I always try to be a little bit over generous with the different actions that I add, or the filters. As long as it's in a controlled way and you give proper documentation about what it's for and what it should be used for. It really doesn't hurt to add filters as long as it won't completely break the plugin or the site. Yeah. Anybody have any questions on those? Who's seen that before? Okay, a couple people. Who's confused by that? Who's not a developer and wants the next spin of the wheel? Any questions? All right, so the final spin of the wheel. I'm out of questions, so who has other questions that you want to have answered?
This is neither here nor there, but I did go on YouTube and learn all about Roulette.
Okay.
It's pretty easy.
It's pretty easy, yeah.
When I go to Encore,
We have Tiverton near me. I go there.
yeah, I've never been, so I might try it.
I like Roulette because it's very basic. It's, you pick something and stick to it.
Yes.
I'm giving gambling advice on the video, but.
I've always wanted to try it, but I didn't know anything about it. And now.
Like red or black,
So,
high or low, even odd. It's easy to follow.
If we were to fast forward, say, 5 years,
Yep.
do you think there will be any need for page builders, like Group Builder, Elementor, whatever, or theme frameworks like Genesis
Yeah.
or whatever?
That's a good question. So I like what Elementor's done. So Elementor basically has templates. You can build templates in the WordPress admin, and they have it where each template can be as blocks, basically. You create your template, it looks like you're editing a page, but really it's like a chunk or a template. And then in any page or any post, you can add a template from Elementor. So it's kind of, we saw the reusable blocks. I showed that a couple times. It's kind of like that, but on steroids. It's like you can do so much more, and it's a little bit easier because it's the same interface. You don't have to like edit the group block before you can edit the internal ones and all that. But then it also comes with all their, you know, they wrap it with certain markup, or they might style it a certain way. You can globally change the styles of all the page templates in Pages and things like that. So time will really tell. I think in the next few years, it's kind of, that would probably be, you know, how they have to adapt.
Just a quick question: are those Elementor blocks or those Gutenberg blocks? They have a bunch of blocks that are specific to their plugin. So they have maybe a testimonial block, and you know, like a product block, or whatever it is, a for sale block. But then it's just the Gutenberg interface, and it's just basically you create a post and it saves, and then it inserts. I can see. Let's see here. Is that like Builder has modules? Like,
yeah.
Like, are these the actual legitimate Gutenberg blocks? Like, is it the Gutenberg data model underneath, or?
Yep. Yeah, they all use blocks. All right, so. Yeah, they actually do a pretty good job.
I use the Astra theme, and it has a thing when you click, show me a page, you know, a site template, and it says, what's your page builder? Gutenberg, Elementor, Beaver Builder, and whichever one you click, it shows you a lot of demo sites for that page builder. It's pretty cool, I think.
So here I'm creating a template, and I'm saying it's just a section. And then, you know, it has like all these different elements here.
So these aren't Gutenberg blocks?
Yeah, now that I look at it, I don't think they are. But I wonder if it's moving more to that.
I think they have a Gutenberg block.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, because at some point the two data models have to,
right.
You know, how do you rationalize those two?
Yeah, so say I publish this, and then I go back to my dashboard. But this is an interface that everybody's familiar with. And so here they just say, okay, you have to edit it with Elementor in our editor. But then if I were to go to a page or a post, let's see. I'm getting lost here because my screen is too small. I can't see the. There we go. Usable beds. Where is it? It's been a bad demo. Post pages. I know I've done it. Maybe I have to look by name. Let's try that. Sales section.
They are very similar in some ways.
Yeah. No. Oh, edit with Elementor. Maybe this is what it was. Let's see.
Let's do this. Maybe there, oh, I think I might know. I think there's a blocks plugin for Elementor that does it. That's what I'm thinking of.
Because how Elementor works, I think Beaver Builder and the others kind of work the same way.
Yeah.
Good to see everyone. Thanks.
Bye.
Jonathan. Yep. Gotta go for it.
Yeah, there we go. Elementor blocks. There we go. So basically you just have a block and you can select your template and it inserts that template. So they, yep. So this is kind of what I see it moving towards, you know, like maybe someone doesn't, they have this already pre-built thing that their customers are really used to and they just have to figure out a way to put it in there. They can still use their, you know, that editor. You know, and maybe they just slowly make it look more like the editor and they just kind of eventually flip the switch and something like that. Easier said than done.
Because you just makes me wonder where this is going. Is some of the stuff we're experimenting with is today there's 20,000 themes.
Yep.
Like why not just one theme with 1,000, right? Yeah. Because if everything is a block, then you don't need those template items.
Right. Yeah, and so one thing that's being worked on right now is when you come here and you type in carousel, say you don't have an image carousel, it would allow you to go out and search, find a block that you need, install it right here, and then use it. So that's being worked on. It's called the block directory. So that's being worked on right now. But it would only, there's limitations because it would only allow it to be, it would be JavaScript only. So it wouldn't install any block that has PHP that, you know, makes it dynamic. So like maybe it needs to add an endpoint to the REST API for it to return the data in the format that it needs to render. Those wouldn't be able, they would have to be purely JavaScript blocks.
Super lightweight then.
Yeah, yeah, and then you could download it and then get rid of it if you don't use it, you know, and things like that. So all those different things are being explored. But I think that you'll see these, back to the original question, I think these page builders are going to really start to kind of experiment with different ways to like, they all have different customer bases and they all do certain things well and people like certain things for reasons. So I think they're going to really start to experiment with how to keep that. You know, I think that's a reason why Elementor has the blocks as an additional thing. People are still using Elementor for pages. They're very used to it. They like how it works. And then this, well, if you do want to use the block editor, here's our blocks, and you can, you know, kind of merge the two experiences.
Is there anything that the Elementor or Beaver Builder data models are capable of that the Gutenberg model doesn't? Because if you were to use them foundationally, you just put that.
Yeah. I'm not too familiar with how they work under the hood, the page builders. Typically, they get a little messy and they're a little bit proprietary in the way they store the information. Yeah, or like one big block of HTML. But I can't really speak for sure to that because I'm not too familiar with those. Anybody else? Any other questions? Yeah, sure.
It's really interesting. It's a plugin, but it's like a page builder, but you don't even need a theme. Well, you need a theme because it's WordPress requires one, but check that out. You're not going to find it in there.
It's premium? Yeah.
It's interesting to see all these new page builders when Gutenberg is out.
Yeah, I think the ones that, so you know, you always hear, like when you're trying to pick a plugin, you know, you want someone that's doing it right and using actions and hooks, and they're not, you know, using the right license, all these things, and playing by the best practices. The the ones that already are, it makes it easier, I think, for them to experiment with the new things in WordPress. Whereas the ones that aren't, they're gonna basically say, oh man, we gotta make some changes so that we can integrate more easily with what the changes that are happening upstream. But yeah, we'll see. I'm sure some will still go their own direction, and they just want to keep using, their customers keep using what they have, and that's what's great.
In that one that I was talking about, it's just strictly related to the output of the code.
Mm-hmm.
It's the cleanest thing I've ever seen.
It's not like
It's
shortcuts.
not
Like visual.
you know how you start seeing Beaver Builder with yes. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Any other questions? No? All right, you're welcome. And that plugin I use